Browns GM Andrew Berry likely expected quiet headlines after the release. What he got instead was Shedeur Sanders dropping a national youth development initiative funded, branded, and fully scalable within 48 hours. The program didn't just exist outside the NFL. It intentionally excluded them. No franchise banners. No league oversight. Just grassroots, self-owned infrastructure designed to bypass the same systemic bottlenecks that left communities under-resourced for decades. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. This wasn't a side project. It was succession planning, and it happened faster than most teams finalize a depth chart. This wasn't a pivot. It was a controlled demolition of the belief that value must be assigned from above. Sanders dismantled the league's monopoly on platform, legitimacy, and narrative, then rebuilt the entire concept of athlete influence on his own terms. What looks like independence is actually sovereignty. From a Hall of Fame validated quarterback tech to the grant matching pipeline for underfunded schools, every arm of his operation proves that relevance is now a matter of execution, not endorsement. This wasn't the Browns losing a player. This was the league losing its script. Shedeur Sanders getting waived by the Cleveland Browns should have been the end of the story. Roster cuts happen all the time. Players fade into the background, try to claw their way back through practice squads, maybe reappear on a depth chart if luck and timing line up. But this wasn't about a depth chart. Within 48 hours of being dropped, Shedeur detonated every old narrative about what a cut player looks like and what they're capable of. He didn't just respond to the league. He bypassed it, not by begging for another chance, not by clinging to locker room scraps. He built something that the league had no hand in, no control over, no equity in. 4 pillars, one message: control is shifting. The $14 million enterprise he launched wasn't a side hustle. It was a fully realized ecosystem. A multi-episode documentary series, a nationwide youth football initiative, a grant-matching foundation, and a wearable quarterback performance tech platform backed by NFL legends. All of it functioning without the NFL's fingerprints anywhere near it. This wasn't noise. This was a structural shift. Start with the documentary. For decades, the NFL has dictated the stories. NFL films, team social media teams, league-run documentaries, sanitize and package to maintain control over the image. What Shedeur did, he cut them out completely. No franchise PR, no agent filtering. Just his voice is pacing his frame. That's narrative sovereignty. And it strips the league of one of its quietest weapons, control over perception. Because now, instead of being remembered as a kid who didn't make the final 53-man roster, Shedeur gets to control the lens. That doc series doesn't just tell his story. It turns a rejection into cultural capital. And it makes every team that passed on him look outdated before the first episode even airs. And then there's the Youth Football Initiative. This is where things get serious. Because for years, the league has relied on surface-level outreach to maintain its image. Flag football weekends, social justice cleats, occasional charity camps. But Shedeur launched something real. Independent, infrastructure-based, and focused on historically underserved communities. This isn't charity. It's strategy. Because while the NFL's youth programs tend to reinforce the existing pipeline, Shedeur's program builds a new one. A grassroots talent path that doesn't rely on high school prestige, elite private coaching, or access to exposure-heavy showcases. It creates opportunity where the league never bothered to invest long-term, and it does it on his terms. So now, he's not just a player. They never let him be one. He's a developer of talent, of access, of influence. And he's not relying on sponsorships or permission to do it. Speaking of access, let's talk about that grant matching foundation. Because this one hits the league right in the budget narrative. Shedeur is injecting direct capital into athletic programs that corporate sponsors ignore. Not flashy college brands or state-of-the-art programs. The under-resourced ones. The ones that get left out of the bowl game hype and spring camp headlines. This foundation doesn't just patch gaps. It redistributes the entire idea of who deserves funding. It's institutional reform disguised as philanthropy. And it's way more effective than waiting for billion-dollar sponsors to trickle down their leftover marketing budget. It proves a point. If athletes have capital, they will invest in each other. No boards, no approvals, no red tape. Now let's get into the tech. The wearable quarterback performance system endorsed by Hall of Fame players? It isn't some PR stunt or crowdfunding gimmick. It's a real product, a long-term data-centric credibility-backed tool that puts analytics into the hands of players. Why is that such a big deal? Because for decades, performance data has been the property of teams. Players get told how they did. Coaches get the real-time insights. But with this platform, that balance shifts. Players now own their data. They manage their own development. And they do it without needing the league seal of approval. This is player-led innovation that meets elite industry standards and builds intergenerational credibility. It's not about going viral. It's about lasting utility. When Hall of Famers back it, there's no dismissing it as trendy fluff. This is a convergence of innovation and validation. It's what happens when performance tech isn't imposed by a franchise, but created by someone who understands the athlete experience firsthand. Now zoom out. Look at the whole model. This isn't someone trying to make noise after being waived. This is someone who saw that institutional support isn't a prerequisite for building impact. Shedeur didn't fight the system. He sidestepped it. He didn't just take control. He built the controls. The Browns waived a player. What they actually did was force the league to look in the mirror and see just how unprepared it is for sovereign athletes. Because this wasn't evolution. This wasn't progress by degrees. It was rupture, and the cracks are visible. Franchises are realizing that the old playbook, recruit, sign, mold, market, is already outdated because the players showing up today, they're pre-built brands. They're coming in with audiences, equity, and end-to-end infrastructure. And when they're dismissed by legacy logic, they just take everything they built and go direct to market. No team, no agent, no studio, just full spectrum execution. And it forces a brutal question. If athletes can build platforms without teams, what's the role of the team? Because once platform ownership becomes more valuable than jersey ownership, the hierarchy collapses. Once visibility isn't something the league gives, but something the player claims through execution, then leverage shifts permanently. And Shedeur's play wasn't about rebellion. It was about responsibility. His model wasn't disruptive for the sake of it. It was values-driven, impact-oriented, and future-proof. He didn't set out to burn the system down. He just showed how to live without it. Now every team has to rethink what scouting even means. It's no longer about just film study and arm strength. It's about leadership capacity, cultural fluency, narrative control, ecosystem building. If franchises can't recognize the value of a player like that, then they're not evaluating. They're just preserving their own irrelevance. The Browns' decision will be remembered not because of what they did, but because of what they revealed. Their framework was out of date. Their metrics? Limited. They scouted for a position. They missed a prototype. They were measuring completion percentages, while Shedeur was out here constructing infrastructure velocity and platform independence. And now that the dust has settled, we're left with this. The league isn't watching a player fall. It's watching its power wane. The next class of athletes won't be asking, where will I get drafted? They'll be asking, what do I own before I get there? And more importantly, what do I keep if they pass on me? Because Shedeur kept everything. His story, his equity, his structure, his momentum. The jersey? Optional. Like if you're watching legacy sports systems struggle to adapt. Comment if you think this model is about to be the norm, not the exception. And subscribe. Because if one player's waiver trigger a power shift is big, just wait until the next one comes prepared. The scariest part for the NFL isn't just that Shedeur Sanders pulled this off. It's that he didn't need them for any of it. And even more damning, the results were better, more efficient, more modern, more aligned with where sports, media, and culture are all going. When the Browns cut him, they expected silence. Maybe a polite thank you post. Possibly an agent scrambling to get his name back into circulation. What they got instead was a statement so loud, so fully realized, that it forced the entire league to reassess not just a player, but the playing field itself. Because this wasn't improvisation. It was execution. Flawless. Immediate. Unapologetic. Within 2 days of being released, Shedeur Sanders had done what most franchises can't even accomplish in a full season. Launch a values-driven, tech-forward, impact-centered enterprise. Not a project. Not a social media stunt. An actual operating model. Fully functional, self-funded, and built for scale. And that's the thing the league still doesn't fully grasp. This wasn't about finding an alternative. It is the alternative. You think the front offices didn't feel that? Of course they did. You don't pour years into building a talent pipeline only to be outmaneuvered by a 21st century quarterback who doesn't just throw spirals. He rewires the architecture of athlete value. Shedeur's move exposed a fundamental truth. The NFL has mistaken compliance for commitment. For years, the assumption was that players needed the league for relevance, for income, for identity. That you make it to the league, and then you get to build. But Shedeur turned that upside down. He built first, and by the time the league tried to define him, he had already defined himself. That's why the system's shaking. Because when a player owns his platform, his story, his capital flow, and his product line, what's left for the team to offer, besides a logo and a locker? And let's be real, they didn't just miss on talent. They missed on relevance. Shedeur's impact didn't come from throwing touchdowns. It came from building an infrastructure that reshaped what a player could do without taking a single NFL snap. That alone makes this a turning point. Because now, the whole prove yourself, earn your shot, wait your turn mythology crumbles under the weight of his execution. He didn't wait. He didn't ask. He built. And it worked. He didn't chase legacy. He engineered it. So what happens next? Other athletes follow. Not imitators, operators. Because the playbook has already been published. You walk into the system with ownership already intact. You show up with a docuseries in development, a foundation with capital flow, a performance product line with endorsements locked. And when you're evaluated, it's not just about footwork and film. It's about platform leverage and ecosystem integrity. That's the recalibration. And it's irreversible. Let's be clear, Shedeur didn't invent this idea. He proved it works. In real time, at scale. He showed every overlooked player, every athlete misjudged by outdated scouting models, that there's a different route, and that it doesn't require compromise. It requires execution. And he executed. That $14 million rollout, it wasn't a splash. It was a structure. It replaced the value typically conferred by the league. It replaced the reach of traditional media channels. It replaced the developmental programs the NFL drapes in community branding. Except this version, it doesn't rely on permission. It doesn't perform for cameras. And it doesn't evaporate when the press cycle moves on. It stays. That permanence is what makes this so threatening to the NFL. Because permanence is power. And when players create their own permanent value, the league's transactional model starts to fall apart. The NFL thrives on the idea that it owns everything. Stories, stats, salaries, footage, fan relationships. But Shedeur's model cuts around all of it. He owns the narrative. He owns the pipeline. He owns the philanthropic engine. And now, he owns the innovation platform that monitors quarterback performance in real time without being attached to a team facility. There is no more waiting room. This isn't a rebellion. It's a new blueprint. And the faster players adopt it, the faster franchises are going to realize that the power they thought they had is slipping fast. Because they're not competing against each other anymore. They're competing against sovereignty. And here's the part that really changes everything. This model rewards alignment, not assimilation. Shedeur didn't bend to get drafted. He didn't quiet down to stay marketable. He didn't scale back to fit expectations. He went bigger, bolder, smarter. And every component of his model reflects that the documentary isn't a vanity piece. It's IP leverage. The foundation isn't symbolic. It's financial redistribution. The youth initiative isn't charity. It's a pipeline he owns. And the QB tech? That's not a gadget. It's a player-led data revolution. None of this is hypothetical. It's built, it's live, and it's independent. You think the Browns are watching this unfold and feeling confident? They were part of a system that measured players by outdated variables and undervalued dynamic potential. They weren't just short-sighted. They were obsolete. Shedeur was playing a different game the entire time. He wasn't trying to get in the system. He was designing a better one. And now that system is visible, viable, working. So, where does that leave the NFL? At a crossroads. Either evolve or keep losing talent. Not to rival leagues, but to no league at all. To the independent economy of athlete-owned platforms. To sovereign models of narrative control and capital structure. To players who can build outside the box and take the audience with them. Because the audience isn't dumb. They see who's doing the work. They see who's moving culture. And they follow that, not the logo on a helmet. Shedeur's relevance didn't come from endorsements. It came from initiative. He made himself matter through clarity, vision, and the kind of execution that institutions aren't ready to match. And now that he's done it, the conversation changes. Athletes won't just ask, "What team do I want to play for?" They'll ask, "What platform supports my vision?" And if the answer is none, they'll build one. That's the new landscape. One where players don't chase legacy. They construct it. Where value isn't granted, it's claimed. And where systems that rely on permission structures are rapidly becoming irrelevant. The NFL isn't just looking at a missed opportunity. It's looking at a model it can't replicate, control, or ignore. Shedeur Sanders didn't just show the world what athlete autonomy looks like. He proved that the future isn't waiting for permission. They waived him. And in less than 2 days, he showed them exactly what that mistake cost. Because what the Browns thought was just another roster adjustment triggered a full-scale redefinition of what power looks like in sports. The kind of power that doesn't beg for minutes on the field or cling to the validation of front office politics. Shedeur moved in a way the league didn't see coming, because they're still stuck thinking influence is granted. He made it very clear. Influence is built. They waived a player. He launched a vertically integrated ecosystem. They saw a backup. He saw a blueprint. Let's be brutally honest. The league isn't structured to understand what Shedeur represents. It's built around compliance, around the assumption that athletes need his platform, its media machine, its endorsement routes. But Shedeur just made that structure look slow, bloated, and irrelevant. By rejecting the league's traditional pipeline and executing his own enterprise, Shedeur didn't just say he doesn't need the NFL. He showed the NFL doesn't even know how to scout what's coming. Because it wasn't just talent they missed. It was vision, infrastructure, strategic clarity, the ability to build value outside the controlled environment of the franchise. And that's terrifying for them. What happens when an athlete creates a media engine that competes with league-owned channels? What happens when they invest their own capital into grassroots development with no oversight? What happens when they launch data-validated performance tech platforms that actually help players grow faster than team facilities? What happens is Shedeur Sanders. And now, every team in the league has to look at their scouting reports and ask themselves if they even know what they're evaluating anymore. Because arm strength and 40-yard dash times won't tell you if a player can architect a $14 million enterprise in a weekend. A Wonderlic score won't help you understand digital engagement velocity or narrative sovereignty. That's the blind spot. Franchises are still grading athletes using templates that haven't changed since the early 2000s. And they wonder why players are slipping through their fingers. Because today, being a generational talent isn't enough. You need to be a generational thinker. And Shedeur didn't just think differently. He executed differently. No pause. No post-cut spiral. No waiting for the league to tell him he's still got potential. He made it clear he didn't need potential. He had plans. Plans that moved. And now that they've moved, everyone else is forced to react. Franchises are scrambling, not to sign him, but to understand him. To figure out how they missed the most obvious sign of where sports culture is headed. Because they didn't just miss on a quarterback. They missed on a prototype. One that doesn't fit into a team chart, but reshapes what athlete influence even looks like. Because Shedeur's enterprise doesn't stop at media, or philanthropy, or tech. It exists at the intersection of all three. That intersection is where the next generation of athletes will operate. And unless the NFL modernizes its frameworks fast, it's going to keep finding itself outpaced, outbuilt, and outnarrated. And let's not ignore what this means for sponsorships either. For years, corporate dollars flowed through the league. Want visibility? Get the league's blessing. Want branding opportunities? Go through the team. But Shedeur just proved that sponsors don't care where you play. They care how you move. And he moved faster, louder, and smarter than most entire franchises. He didn't need the league to attract attention. His execution did that. And that changes everything. Now, the value proposition has shifted. You're not valuable because you're in the league. You're valuable because you build a story, a mission, and a platform people actually care about. The league can't manufacture that. It can only try to keep up with it. That's what makes Shedeur so disruptive. He didn't ask for a seat at the table. He brought his own, set up across the street, and suddenly everyone was watching him instead. And the Browns? They're still holding the empty chair. Their mistake wasn't cutting Shedeur. Their mistake was evaluating him using the wrong rubric. They thought they were releasing a raw quarterback. They were actually releasing a media operator, a philanthropic disruptor, and a tech innovator who happens to throw footballs. And now they get to watch him win, without playing. That's the part the league can't copy. Because what Shedeur's done can't be faked. It can't be retrofitted into the old system. You can't run a workshop on how to move like this. You either build from values and vision, or you don't. He did. He didn't pivot, he planned. His infrastructure wasn't a scramble. It was already in motion. So when the cut came, it wasn't a fall, it was a release. Shedeur didn't get dropped. He got free. And he's using that freedom to show every other athlete what's possible when you stop waiting and start building. When you don't let the system tell your story, but write your own and own it completely. So the next time a team cuts a player and assumes it's just another transaction, they better ask themselves, what happens if this one's got a plan too? Because the minute one player shows that the field isn't the only arena of relevance, the entire model starts to shift, and it's shifting fast. Like this, if you're watching the old playbook crumble. Drop a comment if you think the league's ready, or if it's already too late. And subscribe, because the new era of athlete-led power moves, it's already here. And it's not waiting for anyone to catch up.